and welcome to the community conversation with congressional candidates for District 3. Everybody, I am John Bachman with ActionNews Jax. I'll be moderating this conversation with congressional candidates, hoping to win your vote. So thank you very much for joining us. This is, of course, made possible with the support of AARP Florida and ActionNews Jax. We're proud to partner with AARP, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with a membership of nearly 38 million people, helping to turn their goals into dreams, into real possibilities by changing the way America defines aging. AARP does not endorse candidates for public office, nor does AARP make contributions to political campaigns or candidates. To learn more, you can always go to aarp.org. All right, so let's get this conversation started. I want to let everybody know who's just joining us that we're going to limit answers to 1 minute. We're going to ask that the candidates stick with all of the issues at hand, no personal attacks. We're going to address the audience and moderators only. We're going to keep this civil. That is the important part here because we want to give everybody a chance to speak and give their ideas so that voters have an educated idea of who they are voting for. We want to let you know that we invited everybody who is qualified to run for Congressional District 3 was invited to participate in tonight's event. I'm going to run down the list of candidates who RSVP'd. I know that there might be one or two that aren't here for various reasons, but let's run down the list. We have, is Kat Kamek here yet? I know she RSVP'd and wasn't here early. We have Ryan Chamberlin. Ryan, if you'd give everybody a wave. Ryan is there. Todd Chase, Adam Christensen, Philip Dodds, Bill Engelbrecht, Joe Dallas Millado. Gavin Rollins is set up to join us. He is a county commissioner and has a meeting, so he is going to try to join us as soon as he can. Dr. James St. George, David Theus.
Evening.
And Tom Wells. Thank you all. Oh, I also have Amy Pope Wells as well. So Amy Pope Wells, give us a wave.
Hi.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. I know this is a bit awkward, but we're going to do our best here, including myself. I like to do these things in person, of course. And so here we are dealing with what we have to deal with. Okay, so we're not going to have all the questions we're going to get to, but all of the questions that were submitted from voters. And that's the cool thing here. So folks have been able to weigh in and ask you all questions. So let's start with the topic of the day. The reason we're doing this virtually and not in person, of course, COVID-19. COVID-19 has caused death, suffering, economic hardship across America. What, if anything, do you think the federal government could do now to ease the pandemic and to prevent similar outcomes in the future? All right, it looks like I've got Tom Wells raising his hand that I can see. I'm going to defer to the AARP folks who are helping me keep tabs of all the screens. But since I saw Tom first, we'll go Tom, and then we'll go through the line here. But Tom, go ahead.
Well, the first thing to do is to recognize that it is a federal problem, that intrinsically it cannot be handled at the state or city level. It takes a coordinated effort. We did a shutdown with economic catastrophe, trillions of dollars of zero interest loans to rebound the stock market while the people suffered. And we did nothing to stymie the spread of the pandemic. You have to do tracking and containment. All our neighbors in Europe and in Asia and Australia, New Zealand did this marvelously, and they are open for business again.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much. Who is up next? Let's go. I see David Theus on my screen. Go ahead, David.
Oh, can you hear me? You broke up. Yep. Okay, so, the bottom line is our federal government was acting in real time with non-empirical data when this thing hit us. And so to the best of their ability, I'll give them benefit of the doubt. They were trying to make up things along the way on the fly. And so now we've got some empirical data that's coming in, and we're seeing really what this thing looks like. I think it gives us a perfect opportunity to start planning for the future. I like Governor DeSantis' modulated plan, if you will, where we've been able to look at different counties, phase 1, 2, and 3 rollouts and some counties were affected heavier, and it gives us a chance to measure as we come back online. So some counties like Union County, for example, or Bradford County weren't as bad as Dade or Broward. And so his phase in gave us a good way to come back. Basically, I want us to make sure that we take care of our older and vulnerable people. Though this is a real issue moving forward. And in future pandemics, God forbid we do it again, we've got to realize that there are some vulnerable, I guess each case is going to be separate and apart from another, but take care of our senior citizens and our vulnerable folks first and have some plans in place.
Okay, David, thank you very much. And my screen is limited. Who else wants to weigh in on this? I see Amy down there, so go ahead, Amy. Amy Pope Wells.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for your time. One thing I want to share with the voters is back in 2017, I was chosen to go to the White House to weigh in on healthcare policy. When I first got there, this is one of the things that we identified early, which was the World Health Organization. You know, we have to make these things a priority. Our policymakers, you know, is another example of government not focusing on what it needs to be focused on. So as soon as this issue broke out, we literally began flying the plane as we built it. First thing we did was get on a call with the United States Global Leadership Coalition, and we knew how bad this was going to look. All kidding aside, we knew how bad it was going to look. Here's what has to happen. We have to start working on better preparation. We need to have drills. We need pandemic type planning. We need policy makers that designate certain hospitals and environments to put this as a priority. And once again, I think one of the things that we balance and that everybody understands is we don't want shutdown because we don't want the ramifications of the shutdown to send us into, you know, economic slump or a recession. But at the same time, we have to build for a better tomorrow.
Okay, Amy, thank you very much. I see Joe there also on the screen. Go ahead, Joe Dallas, Millado.
So I think it really does come back down to preparation, whether it's COVID-19, SARS, MERS. This is a global pandemic, and working 11 years on Capitol Hill for, you know, subcommittee chairmen and these issues of energy and commerce and subcommittee health, the question is, why were we always caught off guard? We shouldn't be learning how to teach and educate children during a pandemic. We shouldn't be learning how to telework during a pandemic. We shouldn't be doing any of these during a pandemic. Now, we couldn't specifically identify or look into the future to know exactly what case it was going to be, but these are flus. These things happen every year. So it does go back to preparation, public trust, and it is something where we all have to be held accountable of what we did and what we did to stem these problems. We have to look outside the box, and we do need policymakers that do understand these things, that aren't just pandering to their votes so they can get reelected. They're actually trying to solve the problems. Thank you.
All right, Joe, thank you very much. I see Adam in the queue. Go ahead, Adam Christensen.
I spent the morning on the east side of Gainesville at a place called Grace Marketplace. Grace works to help chronically homeless be able to find permanent housing. The issue is not that we didn't know. We knew. All the epidemiologists knew. What happened was we decided to prioritize hedge funds, predatory lenders, and people that didn't need money before we prioritized people. This last month, a third of Americans did not make their mortgage payment. 28 million people are going to be out on the street very shortly because we did not have a response. We knew what we were supposed to do. We had the plans, we had everything ready to go, and we threw it out the window. So right now the question is, are you going to make sure people are going to be okay? Are they going to be able to afford their home? Are they going to be able to afford food? Are they going to be able to survive to the next month? Right now, I don't see it. We have to prioritize people by giving them money, not giant corporations who are just, they don't care. They don't need it. That's what we have to do.
All right, Adam, thank you very much. We've got, I think Bill Engelbrecht is next in line here. Bill, go ahead.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to say here that I'm a owner of a home health agency, Medicare certified home health agency, and in our healthcare field, working with the health department, as well as on the national level, we have to have an emergency management plan. So I believe, although we were not preparing for a pandemic like this. However, we have been preparing for other types of things like the hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, and et cetera that we experience here in Florida. Right now, I believe that regardless if you have if you have the COVID-19, I also believe that the flu that we have in the wintertime is the same thing. If we were taking the same statistics in the winter for the flu, you would find that it would be the same statistics that we did have for the COVID-19 or even greater. As well as I think a lot of these numbers are skewed based on the hospitals. New York, you know, they're getting more money, reimbursement more because of the cases that they have or the deaths. So anyways, that's me.
All right, we'll double back with you if we get a chance, but I do try to keep the initial responses here at about a minute or so. You can maybe hear that dinger going off.
I can.
On target here. All right, who else wants to weigh in on this? I'm trying to see here. I saw maybe, Tom, did you want to respond to something? Certainly this is a conversation. If something comes up along the way here, we want to talk more about it, by all means, that's what we're going to do. Tom, go ahead.
Absolutely. The points Adam made are correct, that the relief has been directed to the people who need relief least. But the problem is that we have done nothing that will stymie this pandemic. As to it being something where you have to learn as you go, we stymied Ebola. We set up a pandemic response team. It had an office in the White House. These were disbanded. We could have stopped this in China with 0 fatalities. It was not a question of lack of understanding, lack of science. It was a question of rejecting science in favor of magic thinking. And as a PhD in physics, I understand this simple math. We have faced now far graver problems than we faced back in March. As we open things, we will see many more deaths. That is coming in the next 3 weeks. We have done nothing like our neighbor countries have done to solve the problem. We did nothing except close down and profiteer off the closing down.
All right, let me ask you a follow-up question. I'll ask everybody this question. Tom, you're the one up now, but I'm going to ask this to everybody, especially those of you who've already weighed in. The big talk right now is masks, both at a local level and a state level, and frankly, at a national level. Would you support some kind of national mandate for folks like other countries have done to wear masks, a mandate to wear masks and for however long it takes, I guess, to get things controlled? What is your take on masks? I'll go down the line. Tom's saying yes. Let's go someone else here who wants to weigh in. Joe, what do you think?
I absolutely wouldn't mandate something like that. Federal government is supposed to be there to assist people, to fund states and fund these federal programs, but mandates, especially when there is no consensus, it'd be different if they didn't go from one day to another day. And it's not the administration, it's everybody all the way down the chain, up and down the chain. Again, it's unprepared, but no, you wouldn't mandate that when they're saying no to CDC guidelines or this. Yeah, there's these basic things about 6 feet, but there is no certainties. Unless there is absolute certainties, then you shouldn't be putting mandates and then moving the mark back and forth. That's a problem with that idea, as well as everything else we've done in Congress. We've gone one way, then saying, no, we got to turn the switch back on, back off, back on, whether it be the financial bailouts or anything. We got to have consensus, and we have to have it by data, metrics, and we have the technology to actually track if we're going good or bad on this idea or not. But we're not doing that because nobody up there is actually looking out for the people. But that's going to change. If they couldn't solve pre-COVID problems, they're definitely going to solve COVID, these problems after the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in on masks?
We've got Dodd, St. George, Chase, and Kamek that would all like to answer.
Okay, I heard Dodd wants to weigh in. Go ahead, Phil.
Hey, thank you, John. So I graduated from the University of Florida with a math and science degree. I think we should listen to the scientists. The scientists are clear. We need to wear masks. It's the cheapest, most surefire way of slowing the pandemic and getting back to work. It's been proven in other countries. You can see visualizations of it on YouTube. It's very clear. And so let's put on masks and get going. Thank you.
Okay, Phil Dodds, let's go to, I think I heard Dr. James St. George wants to weigh in.
Thank you. Well, I am a physician and a surgeon. I've been dealing with the coronavirus since this happened. I'm president of Florida's largest medical society, and I'm on the board of governors for the Florida Medical Association. So if anyone can speak to this, I can, because I deal with it every day. Masks are important. I'm a surgeon. You wouldn't want me to operate on you without a mask. The purpose of mask is to prevent infection. So the governor and the president both encourage wearing masks and social distancing and prioritize the health for our seniors. The care for our seniors who have tested positive in specific healthcare facilities to stop the spread to other vulnerable adults. One of the things you can bet on is when this is not going to end shortly. There's going to be vaccines, there's going to be policy, there's going to be legislation to address this in Washington. And we need physicians, someone who lives this on a daily basis and understands the epidemiology and the medicine behind this to help craft policy in an educated manner that bureaucrats and lawyers don't understand.
All right, thank you, Dr. St. George. Let's see, I know there's one other person who wanted to weigh in. Help me out here. I can't see. Okay, I got David Theus, go ahead.
Yeah, on the topic of mask, you know, I've been in the district talking to well over 7,500 people since January 3rd in person and without a mask. And the folks that live in Union County and Bradford County, speaking to our district, I can't speak for New York City or Italy or Miami. I'm speaking as a representative to folks in my district. I think it's a little bit well, not childish, but as an American citizen to have my government mandate me to do something. If I'm on a farm or in an agricultural area in Alachua County, for example, then to wear a mask is useless out on my own. I think personal responsibility is key to this. You know, I operate with at least 6 feet, probably 20 feet of personal space between the people I speak with. If I'm sick, I'm staying home. You know, I wash my hands because mom and dad told me to do that. But to have our federal government mandate me to do something, I wear seatbelts because it makes sense. You know, if I rode a motorcycle, which I won't, I'd wear a helmet, even though it's the law says I don't have to. But common sense needs to prevail, and people's freedoms and rights to do as they please within the respect of others. I get it, but a mask mandated by my government, no thanks.
Okay.
Kat and Bill.
Okay. Oh, Kat is here. Okay, very good. Kat Kamek is here, and Kat wants to weigh in on mask mandate. Go ahead, Kat.
Hey, thank you so much. Yeah, the big problem that we have right now with government is this one-size-fits-all mentality that they apply to every single sector of our lives. So I don't support a mandatory mask, a mandate nationwide. I agree, common sense and personal responsibility has to prevail here, and government can encourage. I think Governor DeSantis has done a great job in encouraging folks to wear masks and social distance. But this one-size-fits-all approach where we have to mandate something is an infringement on our personal rights and our constitutional rights. So we should have, and going back to the first question on government and what we could do to mitigate the effects of COVID, there were simple things that we could do as government that would have helped mitigate the market crash that took place. Something as simple as indexing capital gains to inflation, that would have helped stabilize the market. We needed more and more rapidly deployed testing in the field. The testing has been all over the map. There's been more false positives. And so we need to get some better testing. We need to change the attitude in government to be proactive rather than reactive. And again, investing in PPE and all of these, and I hear that timer.
You're doing great. My apologies. It's for all of us. Bill, go ahead. I think Bill Engelbrecht wanted to weigh in as well on the original question, which was mask mandates.
And then Amy Pope Wells.
Okay. Am I up?
You are up. Go for it.
Okay. As far as the mandate, no, absolutely not. And then I'll tell you why. Because if you walk around, you go into any store, any restaurant, and you look at the servers or anybody else that's wearing a mask, they're not even wearing a mask properly. So how can we mandate a mask to be worn? Now, I do encourage that masks be worn around the senior citizens. In my industry, we're around those senior citizens, the elderly that is most vulnerable. And so I do encourage wearing a mask. But I do not believe a mandate is necessary for this. This disease or this pandemic we're not going to be able to eradicate it by wearing a mask. Only way we're going to eradicate it is through a vaccination of some sort. But otherwise, no mandate. Thank you.
All right, Amy Pope Wells, you wanted to weigh in. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. I think we have, from the federal level, we have too many regulations to start with. As a previous practicing healthcare professional, one of the things that we have to take time and think about is not everybody is brought up and taught the same things that we're taught all the time, right? Things as simple as going to the restroom and washing your hands well. What I think we should do is educate people better, allow access to these tools and resources, and make sure that the testing is the way we need to get it done. Proactive planning is critical in these things, but I have to be honest with you. I can go to the grocery store right now in your middle-class neighborhood, and I can run to the restroom, and I can walk out with someone just equally as same as I am, and them not wash their hands. This has to become a proactive conversation, and the conversation has to be about maybe incentivizing people in the way of, we must take care of our vulnerable populations. We must teach our children better and hold each other more accountable. These types of things are not going to be going away. So proactive planning and support, to me, but definitely not regulating it, because we have far too many regulations.
Okay.
Todd Chase?
So you mentioned the vulnerable. Oh, I'm sorry. One more. Who do we have? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Todd Chase?
Yes.
Okay, Todd Chase, you wanted to weigh in on mask mandates. I apologize, sir.
Thank you. That's okay. 13 years of Catholic school. This reminds me of never get caught.
Yeah, I know. That's what we're at.
But yeah, I mean, so I don't want to repeat the whole thing on the masks that a lot of my other people have said. I mean, my mother was on prednisone for a number of years and had immune system problems and wore masks often, was very careful. I think that, again, people are able to take care of themselves and make decisions. And again, these government mask mandates, I think it's showing, I think what Americans are mainly concerned about is that every single issue in this country becomes a partisan divide right down the middle. I was a Navy officer for 26 years. I was a pilot, and I operate all over the world. And we're in the middle of addressing this thing daily. And so instead of constantly just taking shots and pointing fingers and paying blame, I think Americans want to see us move forward and move together. Some of the things we can do clearly is we can continue to advance the therapies and the immunizations that are being built. That's something that we can do. That's what's going to help us get out of this long term. What's interesting is if you watch the process it takes to get drugs approved, was that the ding?
It was. You want to finish your thought? I'll let you finish the thought.
Very good. My finished thought was that the government has already shown that our parties can work together to advance therapeutics and devices and other things, help bring jobs back here. Going forward, that's what we need to do. We need an immunization on this, and we need to advance it. And I think our country will be better off for it as we continue to advance medicines quicker, because it's not a crisis, because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, you hit on something that I want to make sure we get back to, and that is this political divide, which seems to be growing. I want to get back to that for everybody here, but let's stay with COVID for at least a little bit longer here, because it is such an important topic right now. Nursing home and assisted living residents comprise 2% of Florida's population or so, yet they account for nearly half of all coronavirus deaths. What would you propose to make these long-term care facilities safer for residents during the current pandemic and in the future? And I know some of you have already kind of touched on that, and I see some hands going up.
Bill.
Let's see. I see Bill Embrek. Bill, go ahead. You go first.
Well, one of the things that they are practicing now within our district in the nursing homes is that they are not allowing visitors to come in. And as you can see, that's across the nation, that they're seeing loved ones through windows and so forth. That will help keep the most vulnerable safe at this point, as well as the PPE. If they can continue to wear the personal protection equipment, at least until they can come up with some kind of vaccination or some way to minimize the effects on the comorbidities that the individuals in these nursing homes have, I think that's where what we're looking at is are vulnerable. They are mostly affected by this because of those comorbidities. But just like the winter flu, you know, I would call this COVID thing almost like a summer flu per se. So, but anyways, that's how we would keep those people taken care of.
Kat,
All right,
then
Bill,
Joe.
thank you very much. Kat, you were, I think, next to raise your hand. Go ahead.
Thank you, John. Well, what I would do is the opposite of de Blasio in New York. We saw firsthand the terrible, terrible plan that New York had and ended up infecting more people within the nursing homes by placing people that had tested positive with COVID and moving them into the population that was healthy. And that created a disaster. So doing the opposite, also doing a rapid deployment of testing for personnel that works within the nursing homes, tightening up visiting hours. I think Governor DeSantis has done a great job, and I have family that is in a local nursing home here, and they did a wonderful job in protecting residents for that particular facility. But getting PPE into these facilities is critical, and doing it right at the outset, that needed to be happening and done early on. And then if there was an outbreak in a facility, quarantining those that were affected quickly instead of leaving them to mingle amongst the general population within the facility, that is something that we definitely need to do. So if it's the opposite of de Blasio, then it's a better plan.
Okay. Kat, thank you. Todd, I think, is up next. Todd Chase.
Sure, thank you. You know, when it comes to the nursing homes and these rehab centers, I've got a lot of experience in them with both my mother and mother-in-law. And, you know, Governor DeSantis has done a good job. You know, I believe we're seeing and we're learning as this thing goes. If you watch what some businesses are doing and these sports leagues that are having the concept of the bubble, you know, where it's just single access and ingress points, people are getting tested, the staff are constantly tested, and they're keeping them quarantined and off to the side. We can do this. This should not be a difficult situation. If you've got the homes where everybody's mixed in there, again, I've spent a lot of time in these places, and it's hard to keep everybody apart, even within just the same building. So we need to continue to work and isolate those that are most vulnerable, those that have it, and get them through this. And I do think that, again, there's the concept of government mandating and then just American people doing what we do best, innovating and taking care of ourselves and figuring things out. We can do this, and we can keep people safe at the same time. And I wish we stopped scaring people.
Next up,
thank you very much.
It's Joe Phillip. It's Joe Phillip Adam.
Okay, Joe Dallas Millado, you're up next.
So it does come back to personal responsibility. That's the first thing. Personal responsibility in terms of, you know, we should be doing these things on a consistent basis. I don't know what people were doing when, you know, if you're just washing your hands or doing these precautionary things during a pandemic, these are things you should be doing Monday, Tuesday, all throughout the week, every day. This is something that adults, we just do, right? The other thing is using the current resources we do have. Yes, we couldn't plan for this specific one, but again, prioritizing these things. If the vulnerable is, in this case, is the elderly, we should have had any of these resources or things prioritized to the elderly. You know, you and I could probably, they're more vulnerable than we are. The other thing is that we could probably use grants, innovation. This is what America is. Use all these grants that are just getting thrown out the window every year, year after year, because they had to have a CR and we can't repurpose them. We got to get our house back in order. We can repurpose grants, have that innovation, maybe have some new technologies that will maybe allow us to identify or to, you know, we work with innovative technologies all the time with the VA. There's technologies out there. We just got to think outside the box and prioritize and use the current resources we do have.
Joe, thank you very much. Philip Dodds, you're up.
Hey, thank you. So I have older parents and young children, and I think what some of where the conversation misses is that we're all connected. You can draw a straight line between what's going to happen with our children going back to school in a few weeks and what will then happen with seniors in nursing homes. And I think the carelessness and laissez-faire attitude with go back to school let the teachers and the children figure it out is really a mistake and a bit shameful. We need a comprehensive approach to handling the pandemic where everyone takes responsibility, especially our leaders, and then seniors will be safer. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Adam Christensen, you're up.
Here's our issue, and I think we all just saw it. We just watched a group of individuals who have absolutely no idea what they are doing tell us how to stop a pandemic. And the entire time, the only doctor in this meeting is sitting there laughing and shaking his head.
Do you want to review the rules for Mr. Christensen?
Yeah,
Adam,
let's try
I
to
did
keep
not
this
mention
civil.
anyone by name, number one. Number two, there's some people that are okay with wearing seatbelts, but they think that a mask infringes on their personal liberty. You can have COVID-19 and not even know that you have it and spread it, asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic. And number three, if people don't know how to use a mask, then that means the government didn't do its job. So if you actually want to fix these things, if you actually want to make people better, right now we lead the world in cases and in deaths. And at this moment, I mean, if we're going to do what you just mentioned, those things should have been done 2 months ago. And if they're not going to be done now, it's not going to get fixed because the economy doesn't come back if 200,000 people are dead.
Dr. St. George, Tom Wells.
Dr. St. George, you're up.
Thank you. Well, I'm not shaking my head over the comments about the severity of COVID. I'm shaking my head over misinformation. You know, one size does not fit all. If you come into my office as a patient, I don't treat you according to a checklist that applies to every patient. I look at you individually. We cannot take policy and governmental regulations that apply across the board to everyone. The mandates or the recommendations for a 20-year-old are not the same for an 85-year-old. And that must be, we still have to have some civil rights in our life. We can't have big government, as you would like to have, control everything. We have to make decisions according to medical policy and what's best to protect our seniors. The risk of an 85-year-old dying in a nursing home exposed to COVID is dramatically, exponentially higher than that of a 20-year-old. And they need to be different guidelines. So what I'm shaking my head at is the inability to some individuals to not understand the proper way to institute policy.
Okay, thank you very much. I know somebody else was.
It was
Tom Wells.
Yep.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. The question of nursing homes in New York, Governor Cuomo snuck a liability limitation into a bill, budget bill, 2 years before that group of hospital and nursing home owners, long-term care owners, gave him $2 million for his reelection. They then cut corners on minimizing costs. Obviously, the cost of a nursing home care is greatly enhanced during a pandemic. So they cut all those corners, and the death rate in nursing homes in New York was 7.5 times that of nursing homes where the owners were responsible for the failures of liability. Now, this comes to the broader point of money in politics and the fact that we are abusing the essential workers. We are treating them as expendable, which I couldn't understand for a moment 3 months ago when I read that essential workers who are picking food, who are working in Amazon, were getting paid less than they were before because there's so many people desperate for jobs that they can just allow them to die. Thank you for the moment extra.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Ryan Chamberlin and Bill for the final one.
Okay, Ryan Chamberlin, you wanted to weigh in.
Thank you so much. Listen, you know what I'm about to say means no disrespect to any medical professional, but I think where we're at is the American people just don't know who to trust. They're constantly hearing mixed signals from so-called professionals, and rightfully so, they are professional in the degree that they've earned. But most people have no idea who to believe in this particular topic because of the way that it's being distributed. They don't believe their politicians either. You know, my opinion is that most of the issues that we're dealing with now can be dealt with common sense practices. I've heard that from several people on this particular panel. But we shut the country down, and that did not slow down this particular pandemic, in my opinion. It is going to take its course. I know there's precautionary things that can be done. It seems to me that most people are taking the precautionary things that they want to take without being mandated upon, and it will take its course. The last thing I'm going to say is we're seeing a widespread of manipulation take place on both sides of the aisle here, certainly on the Democratic side, and we're seeing some problematic things with some, I'm not happy with everyone I'm seeing on the Republican side. And the American people need to stand up for what, and put a stop to this manipulation of information. I mean, the way the PPP funding, for example, the bailout has taken place, it's disgusting what we have done as a country to put on my children and your children and even grandchildren. Thank you.
All right, Ryan, thank you. And I apologize, the timer was not reset. That was a moderator error, so I apologize, but I think you got about a minute or so, so well done. Bill, did I hear that Bill Engelbrecht wanted to wait?
Bill, then ending with Amy. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, and then we're going to get to Amy Popewells after that, and we'll move to the next question if it doesn't prompt more questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so if you look at the statistics, the ones that are getting sick is the elderly itself. What we have done in our healthcare industry is the nursing homes has stopped receiving patients from the hospital, because what they've done is they've locked down that nursing home, and rightfully so. So what the hospitals have been doing is sending the patients home. The patients heal better. They're in their own environment. They're at home. And when they're around, when our healthcare workers go in, they are wearing the essential, the PPE that is needed in order to keep the workers safe as well as the patients safe. So I believe that we have already taken major steps in reducing the deaths that we have here in Florida in regards to nursing homes and assisted living facilities by sending in, having home health come in and take care of these patients in their home directly. The hospitals were cleared out because they thought for sure that this pandemic was going to flood it all. So now that they know that it's not going to do that, send the patients home, lock down the nursing homes, and that has been a way to minimize the amount of cases in the nursing homes, as well as the deaths that unfortunately that we've had seen so far.
Okay, Bill. Amy Popewells, you're up.
Yes. Well, I think one of the things that we have to talk about here is when we're talking about CD3, we're talking about the state of Florida, right? What is Florida? It is a haven for retirees, right? So because we have an active lifestyle, we have ideal living conditions as far as environment, therefore it makes Florida to be a higher population for those that are more vulnerable. But when I look at this, in addition to a higher population, age population, guys, being in healthcare previously, I got to be honest, nursing homes have not been historically given the support that they need. If you walk in nursing homes, sometimes you can just feel the way it looks, right? It's not like we're making them the best and the brightest of facilities. You know, granted, there's new models that have come out with different types of facilities, but the reality is we've not given the attention it's deserved. We've gotten hit from the side with something, and like I said, we tried to solve it as fast as we could. But the reality is you know, putting some alternative solutions in place, making a priority, especially with this day and time, and having people trust, you know, what the actual numbers are is to me a place to start. But I feel bad for our nursing homes because we have not give them the priority they deserve.
Okay, thank you very much, Amy. Okay, so we've talked some of the health issues with COVID-19, and there are some bigger health issues that I would like to get to as well. But before we move off of COVID-19, we have to talk about the economic issues because some of you touched on them. Certainly, it is of importance. Unemployment during the coronavirus crisis reached the highest level since the Great Depression. Millions of people filing for unemployment. What would you propose to help Americans recover economically from this pandemic and to prepare, if you can, for any future similar events or disasters? What can we do to recover from what we're experiencing now, and perhaps maybe long-term, what kinds of things could we do to keep something like this from happening again, at least economically? Who wants in first?
Phil,
Go ahead, Tom. Oh, David, I'm sorry, David. I'm told David waved his hand first. I just couldn't see him. We'll get to Tom in a second. David Theus, go ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would say let's get back to work. You know, the problem is this is an event that just It came from China. It just came out of the sky. And so it's difficult to plan for these sort of things. But now that we've had some data come back in and we've realized that we've got, and I wouldn't say we have a handle on it, but we at least have an understanding of expectation of what it's doing, then the folks who can go back to work in Idaho and people in our district, for example, that I talk to every day that are working in Bradford County, that are working in Union County, that are working in Clay County, we got to go back to work. That's how we solve our economy. We can't, those, you know, I told someone at coffee yesterday, those of us that are working from home, that have jobs that are paying you to stay home, cut off your pay for 6 weeks and see how the attitude changes. You know, these people that work in their own businesses, small business owners like I am, you know, I haven't had a paycheck in 120 days. So I think it's time we go back to work, first of all. As far as planning for the future, our large governments and state governments have got to do a better job of getting some secure funds set aside, emergency funds, and personal. Each of us as a financial registered rep, I tell all my clients, you need 6 months of emergency fund. If you're a business owner, you need 12 months. And so personal responsibility again. Government, I'm not a government will fix your problems kind of guy. I'm a get the hell out of the way government kind of guy, because government screws things up. We're individuals that God gave us a brain. We can do this, but we got to start acting appropriately and with responsibility.
David, thank you. Tom, now we'll get to Tom Wells, I believe. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, sir. As bad as the pandemic is, and it is about to get considerably worse here in America, we are doing worse than Brazil, where my wife is from, and they are doing the second worst in the world. I have a PhD in theoretical physics, and I have grandchildren, and I recognize from the science that this is both predictable and it is only a practice run for the climate collapse that is in our immediate future as we continue down this path. We can build our way out of this economic doldrums by hiring millions of people to rebuild infrastructure, to build secure and redundant solar panels for electricity so that we can have redundant power supply across the country as the incidence of forest fires and wild storms increases. We have to do it now. I've been aware of this for a long time and nothing is changing except the rapidity with which things are changing.
Tom, thank you.
Philip, Todd, James.
Okay, Philip Dodds, you're up next.
Yeah, so I noticed when you first asked the question, there was a long pause. What do we do now about the economy, right? There's not a lot of folks with ready answers here, so I'm glad you brought it up. One thing is that as we open up and get back to work, as you say, we have to be monitoring the rates of infection and death. And the only way to do that is with random sampling of populations. With the random sampling of populations, we can tell, instead of guessing, instead of ideologuing, we'll be able to tell are infections going up or are infections going down. And when they're going down, we have to take more, when they're going up, we have to take more precautions. When they're going down, we can be more free and get back to work. But without the random sampling, without the lens of science, right, and epidemiology guiding our direction, just going back to work and ignoring the buzzsaw of this pandemic as it comes full force without any of us paying attention and without any of us knowing the facts, I think that's a mistake. We want to get back to work and we will, but we have to manage our way back. Thank you.
Todd Chase. Todd Chase,
you're up next.
Thank you. Specifically to the economy and just the financial impact in preparing. I mean, listen, the way I was raised and the way I've lived, I mean, people have worked hard. I know a lot of people that are doing the best they can to take care of themselves with their creditors, there was something you mentioned about mortgages earlier. You know, the banks are working with their customers. You know, I'm in real estate now. We're working with our tenants. You know, loans are being, you know, delayed and pushed. And I believe in the American will, the American spirit of people that will take care of themselves. Now, this is unprecedented, obviously. It's where we hear a lot. We had an emergency declaration early and a lot of money got put out there, but I don't know what it solved exactly. I don't know anyone that got $1,200 and all of a sudden everything was fine. I mean, I think we're 4 months into this or more, and most of the people I know have readjusted. They've refigured their lives out, and they are going forward with that. You know, the concept of people saving money and doing different things. You know, we don't always get to pick when things happen in our lives. I went through struggles in my life with health and things, and so I think I rely on the people to take care of themselves, and that's what we should be.
Dr. St.
Thank you very
George,
much.
Dr. St. George,
St. George, you
then
are up
Kat.
next.
Thank you. Well, healthcare is an extremely complex industry, and this is a novel pandemic. We haven't dealt with anything like this in our generation. And we have to balance. There is, just as I mentioned earlier, there is no black and white, one size fits all solution. We've been learning this as we go. So we opened up the economy more. We had to open up the economy more. You know, because the morbidity and mortality, the consequences of staying in a lockdown, depression, suicide, increased alcoholism, people not getting the health care they need, people were not going to the hospital for MIs and dying at home. The death from that, difficult to test, may be higher than the actual virus. Washington spending is out of control. The solution is not just throwing more and more money at this problem. Our national debt is greater than our GDP. It's a trial and error. We opened up the economy, infections went up. But those infections were more in the younger population. The number of deaths have not gone up. As mentioned earlier, it is a balance. We have to find that balance.
Dr. St. George, thank you. Kat Kamek, you are up.
Thank you, John. So I think that the federal government response as we begin economic recovery from COVID should take a page out of the Hippocratic Oath and first do no harm. And that means in some cases temporarily and in others permanently deregulating certain aspects of our different agencies. That way we can have our industries that are rebuilding and restarting. They have some flexibility to get things done without the burden of red tape from the federal government. Next, we have an opportunity here to bring manufacturing truly back to the United States. There has been a tremendous discussion about all of the pharmaceuticals, medical manufacture or medical device manufacturing that takes place overseas, namely in China. This is an opportunity for us to bring back those manufacturing sectors and provide good paying jobs for Americans here. Also getting spending under control. We cannot have a short-term response that's going to have long-term consequences. So eliminating government mandates such as paid leave for small businesses and the payroll tax cut extension is a huge thing. And we've already talked about indexing capital gains to inflation to stabilize the stock market.
Kat, thank you very much.
Amy Jo Adam.
Amy Pope. Amy Pope Wells is up next.
Thank you. So to share with the audience, one of the things is I've been in the job business for many, many, many years. I've spent a lot of time placing hundreds of thousands of people over the course of my life. Two conversations here. Number one, the response to COVID-19 has brought us to a new era, right? I think one of the things that we have to think about is, number one, the World Health Organization was not prepared and did not do its job in relation to this pandemic. That's one problem. We need to follow the advice of policy and not politicians. We have allowed ourselves to be in a mess. This shows us now more than ever that American-made products and the importance of global health is our health, right? And people weren't talking about it for a long time, but the reality is the way people move around, whatever's happening in other parts of the world is gonna happen here very rapidly. But the one thing that we don't want to have is the inability to have access to mask and test and solutions. So what I would say is number one, or three things. Number one, let the World Health make it do its job. The World Health Organization is responsible for this, and therefore they should take responsibility for this, number one. Number two, get out of the politician business and allow the policymakers to decide what's best to move us forward. And three, start buying and supporting American-made products so that we're not at the mercy of the rest of the world. Thank you.
Joe, then Adam.
Thank you. Joe Dallas Millado, you are up.
So it really, again, a lot of these COVID questions, my response is always going to come down to public trust and personal responsibility and consistency. Now, if you were a small business owner and you were just hearing this and that and mixed messages on the news from, your government or locals or experts, then you're really not going to know. It's, again, to be learning a blueprint during a pandemic responsibility. You should have had this already drawn out, because we've had these kind of things before and we're going to have them again. And history will continue to repeat itself until we do something about it. And that's what we're trying to do with this campaign. So it has to be, if you're going to talk about a phase-in approach, then it has to be based on substance. The problem is that this is the baseline. We're thinking about a baseline blueprint approach in the year 2020. Now just take a moment and think about that. So everybody had failed us up and down the line, all these smart experts. Now anybody speaking of the baseline, anybody here that's saying the World Health Organization, we don't have any jurisdiction over them. We do have jurisdiction over people that that represent us in Congress. We have members on the Foreign Affairs Committee that don't go to these hearings and don't know and can't hold them accountable, these words that we use. And that's the other problem. So anybody emulating to be any of these members right now, that is the baseline. What Millado and Team Millado will bring is something exponentially better. Thank you.
Adam, and then Bill.
Adam Christensen, you're up.
There's one thing that I agree with every single person on here. We were not ready. We were not prepared. Not in the way they're saying. 40% of people in the United States before the pandemic were living paycheck to paycheck. We didn't understand that if one person doesn't have health care in a pandemic, then everyone else is at risk. On top of that, we moved all our manufacturing jobs and most of our products overseas. So when we could no longer get them because it was an emergency, we didn't have the ability to actually produce them. And at the end of the day, that happens because our government decides that they're going to give our money, the things, our taxes, twice in 12 years to the biggest companies in the world and private hedge funds, instead of making sure that people and workers are okay. We have to have the understanding that if somebody works 8 hours a day, it doesn't matter what job they're working. They should be able to afford a home and a family and have money left over.
Adam, thank you. Bill Engelbrecht, I believe you want to weigh in as well.
Yes. If you think back to the housing crisis, the problem with the housing crisis is that the federal government loaned the money to the actual banks. So instead of them the banks helping with the individuals, they failed America in itself. So I believe what President Trump has done is by giving it to the small businesses, because our small businesses is the backbone of America. And by giving them the PPP, it has allowed them to open up and to keep functioning and keep the market going. If our unemployment was high as 15%, maybe a little bit more, that means 85% of America was working. We are bringing unemployment down. And I believe the plan that he has used by giving the PPP is bringing all this down, as well as opening up opening up every parts of the country. Again, if prior administrations on the housing market, if they would have went to the bank and they said, okay, we're going to give you 3% guaranteed on this loan, although it's 11%, we'll pay you the difference. And then that difference that would allow the person to stay in their home and keep their home, and these neighborhoods wouldn't have shut down the way they did, and the values of homes wouldn't have been lost either. So I believe that we did learn from something back then, but I applaud President Trump for doing what he did with the PPP, as well as giving everybody $1,200.
Let's
Okay,
end
Bill,
with Ryan.
Okay, Ryan, I believe we're going to end with you unless somebody else chimes in, but Ryan Chamberlin, go ahead.
Thank you. Listen, our Constitution is being trampled, and our free enterprise system is under attack. I've worked with thousands of entrepreneurs over the last 20 years, and I truly believe that the American people are smart enough to figure this out. And when it comes to what we need to do, we need to get back to work. We've heard that. We need to do it in the smartest way possible. But the idea of clamping down on all businesses across the board and mandating anything is absolutely against what it means to be an American.
Okay.
John, I'm sorry to, I just add one last final point.
Sure, go ahead, David.
I want to speak on behalf of all of us. You know, there's looking at this screen and the people that are watching, there's a lot of talking heads on this screen. And I seem to remember that we're applying to be your representative. And so my understanding of the founders, they knew this land was going to be great and vast. And they knew that Lincoln stepping over people sleeping in the people's house, those days are gone. And so we're supposed to go to the district, whether it's here or Vermont or Nevada, but we're supposed to be the eyes and ears on the ground for our folks because they can't go back to Washington every day. So all of us on this page, while the rest of us have been, you know, pontificating about what the federal government should do, but how about we start listening to the people in our district? They're the ones that are going to send us to Washington, and we start listening to what they have to say and go speak on their behalf. That's what I thought a U.S. House of Representatives is supposed to do.
Okay, David, thank you very much. Let us go now to talk to COVID extensively, and I appreciate everybody weighing in on that. Let's broaden this out because this pandemic has definitely shown the importance of having affordable and accessible health care for Florida and for Americans. What would you propose to enhance Florida residents and all Americans' access to affordable health care? Let's talk big picture health care, and then
Adam
we'll move
Christensen had his hand up first.
Okay, Adam Christensen, you had your hand up first. Go ahead, Adam.
Right now, I think that we need to actually let the free market work. Right now, we're not allowed to negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies, which means that a bottle of insulin sells for $350 here, but $12 in every other country. Only takes $6 to make. And that means people have to ration. On top of that, you have middlemen, you have grifters that are taking 30% of every single dollar that you pay for healthcare. They're just taking it, and they're stealing from you. So you need to remove those middlemen from the entire industry. And at that point, guess what? Things are easier, things are cheaper, and you have way less red tape. If you want to talk about being a conservative, that's something you should be behind. Removing insurance companies from the healthcare industry, because they don't serve a purpose.
Dr. St. George.
Adam, thank you very much. Dr. St. George, you're up.
Thank you. Well, you know, the medical industry issue is very complex. The healthcare affordability is very complex, and there's many facets to it. Medicare provides essential healthcare for millions of seniors, particularly in Florida. We must continue that and support our elderly population. When it comes to the Affordable Care Act, I do have serious concerns. As a physician, every day I witness that it's a disaster. Deductibles are up, costs are up, choices are down, network choices within the for-profit insurance companies are down. We need changes. We need reform. I think we're probably all in agreement with that. We need affordable health care for all individuals. The issue is, how do you make it affordable? There's many facets to that. Litigation from tort lawyers and malpractice in defensive medicine is a problem. I totally agree with what you said about the drug industry. Pharmacy benefit managers, middlemen are a problem, driving costs up. The insurance industry is a for-profit industry, and physicians here as a practicing physician. So there needs to be reform, and as a physician, I hope to help do that.
Right, Dr. St. George, thank you very much.
Tom Wells, then David.
Tom Wells, you're up. David, you're next.
Thank you. For decades, I've been espousing Medicare for all, and I've done the math, and I've read the papers by the economists. We can transition in 1 year to a Medicare for all. I'm on Medicare now. I have worked at major institutions like Georgia Tech, had very fine insurance. The price goes up every year. The selection of doctors is far inferior to what I have in Medicare. So if we improve Medicare to include, well, not hair, but hearing, eyes, teeth, mental health, we have a product which will cost, believe it or not, $1 trillion less per year than what we are paying in aggregate now for healthcare. And we will not have 48 million people dying for lack of access like my son-in-law's father did 5 years ago. We will not have millions of people declaring bankruptcy. It is a primary cause of bankruptcy in this country is medical expense. It is also the primary care of small business failure. Small businesses will be vastly more competitive with Medicare for all.
Tom, thank you. David.
You know, competition is a beautiful thing here in America. The very computers that probably all of us are sitting in front of cost less per inch and per value than the very first one I bought from who knows what company it was. Just to spend $1,200 a day, you get a spaceship versus what we did 15, 20 years ago. So regulation is a big problem within our free market society. So government's always trying to put how you can do business between state lines or you can't. The insurance industry is a part of that game too, because they want to protect markets, but competition is a beautiful thing. For those folks that are AARP members, I think it's important that Medicare is going to be around, and we need to, part of the solution is for us to get back to work so we can keep funding it. But, you know, I'd like to see Medicare be able to negotiate and get some better pricing. I'd like for us to get some of the fraud and waste out of the system. I think that maybe there's a cap that we can put on pharmaceuticals. You know, I know a lot of older folks that they have to make decisions whether or not they're going to spend money on drugs or anything. So maybe there's a cap in the plan we can put together, but competition, we need competition.
David, thank you.
Bill, Kat, and then Todd.
Okay, Bill, you're up. Kat, you're next.
Thank you, John. Last year in 2019, our big name insurers profited over $35.7 billion off the backs of hard-working Americans, as well as the small business owners. That right there needs to be looked into, needs to be taken back. If you think back when the insurance industry was created, the HMOs, it came in as a catastrophic insurance. You could go to the doctor for $30, $50, whatever it may be. But now that the insurance industry has competed with itself and offering so many other benefits, now they got to pass that cost to the individuals as well as small businesses. Our prescription drugs, there is no reason why our seniors has to look at the end of the month, decide whether they need to have prescription drugs or they need to eat. There is no reason for that in the world. We are too rich of a society, and our seniors should be taken care of in the most effective and way. That's it.
Okay, Bill, thank you. Kat.
Thank you. So something that hasn't been mentioned yet tonight is, first and foremost, we need to defund, repeal, and bury Obamacare. The framework is still on the books, and there have been attempts throughout the years to get rid of it, but that framework is still wreaking havoc on our healthcare system as we know it. So in order to truly get back to a free market system, we have to get rid of that framework that was put in place under the Obama era. And that, again, tort reform is a huge component to this, getting rid of the concerns that our practitioners have when it comes to medical malpractice, as far as these ridiculous lawsuits that saddle them with incredible regulations and issues. Being able to negotiate drug prices. Right now, the global prescription drug market is filled with counterfeit products. There's intellectual property breaches left and right, and there's artificial price controls, which are all making things more expensive. So we've got to get a handle on drug prices, getting back to the basics, restoring that doctor-patient relationship, getting the insurance companies out of the way, because right now there is not that relationship, and allowing folks to purchase across state lines will foster competition and lower prices, making healthcare more accessible and affordable for all.
Kat Kamick, thank you very much. Todd Chase, you are up. Thank
you. I want to speak directly to this audience, the AARP audience. District 3 that we're all running for, 50% of this district, nearly 50% of this district is older than 55. Close to 30% is older than 65. So for those out there, the terms like prescriptions and out-of-pocket costs and co-pays, deductibles, those are the kinds of things that impact you. If you're out there living on $1,600 a month, like I know a lot of people are, like someone that I love did, then you've got to worry about affordability. A little tweak here and a little tweak there. And you got to know that the deal that you signed is not going to get changed and taken away. And Obamacare is not going to cause it to drive costs up so we can do things on the back end of the early people. So we've got to continue to protect seniors, because when my mother was still alive, every 4 years she would be scared by a bunch of nonsense. And I can assure you that when I go to Washington, I'll protect what you have and the deal that you have, and also help you plan for your home care. Because as we all know, we talk about health care a lot, but we don't understand the cost of home care. And the better home care you have, the better health you'll have and less health care costs in the end.
Todd, thank you very much.
Amy, then Adam.
Okay, Amy Pope Wells, you are up, and Adam Christensen, you will follow.
So as someone said earlier about ACA, it was June of 2017. I was sitting in the White House. President Trump had been elected in January of that year. And I sat there with President Trump and Vice President Pence, and I have been on this kick, and I will still stay on this kick: repeal and replace Obamacare. I agree with Dr. St. George. Healthcare is very complex. But not only is it complex, there is a monopoly in healthcare. Let's be honest. Costs are out of control, services more complex, pricing and transparency are not always there. You know, it starts with opening up the competitive market to the states and getting the federal government out of the healthcare business. I think we need a better prescription plans and incentives to the drug companies for seniors. And I think we should hold drug companies accountable for those pricing models. Free market solutions and competition solve some of these problems.
Okay, Amy Pope Wells, thank you very much. Adam Christensen, you're up.
I would like to sincerely thank every single person here for agreeing with me on drugs, with me on insurance companies, and with me on making sure that the market is competitive. We don't have monopolies holding everything. I'd like to thank you for backing Medicare for all. At this point, you know, we're the only country in the entire world where if your kid gets cancer, you're probably going to go bankrupt. We're the only country in the world right now that basically says that healthcare is a for-profit institution. We're the only country in the world that says you don't get to choose your doctor, you don't get to choose the hospital, your insurance company does. So I really appreciate all of your support and for coming really to the progressive side on this, because the original progressives were Republicans, and it's good to see you coming back into the fold.
Philip, then Joe.
Okay, Adam. I'm sorry, who's up next?
Philip, then Joe.
Okay, Philip, you are up. Philip Dodds.
Hey, so I wanted to follow up on Adam's comment and say it's really important to listen to what everyone says, because you can learn a lot. I had preconceived notions about what a lot of the comments might be here. I'm really glad that everyone has distanced themselves from President Trump's budget that he submitted in February that was going to cut Medicare. I'm glad everyone's defending Medicare. I'm also glad that we talk about free market, and free market is important, that we all want to regulate drug prices, right? Because those regulations are what's going to keep drug prices down. The CMS and Congress should be able to negotiate drug prices on our behalf rather than letting drug companies have their way with us and being allowed to pick their fees. So I do appreciate that. I had a lot of assumptions as well. So I'm in favor of also reducing sugar subsidies. I think by paying with a corporate socialism to sugar and producers, that we're artificially decreasing the price of sugar in our foods and really causing a lot of preventable disease that we can avoid. So I hope you all will also agree with that. Thank you.
Phil, thank you. Joe is up now. Joe Dallas Millado.
Yes, thank you. Every American should have access to high quality healthcare that's both affordable and reflective of their needs. As your next representative, I will work tirelessly to champion quality, affordable choice through market-based competition, innovation, and transparency, not more government mandates. What does that mean? That means that we're going to put you in the driver's side. Now, I love a lot of people that are going to say that they're going to do these things in Washington immediately. That's not going to happen. You know, there's tons of people in these industries that a lot of my other candidate opponents already have that fail to do what they're talking about. Repeal, replace Obamacare. They act like that's the simplest thing to do. It's not. And that's step number one, is that when you go to represent District 3, you better know what hurdles are already up there, because it's the same old individuals that go there and say, hey, the problems were actually too bigger than I actually thought. But all the while, a Joe Millado, myself, could solve it. This current problem that we have now. It is not solvent. If we could just get Medicare overpayments, and I keep mentioning this, 60 million or 60 billion, something. But if we could just solve something as overpayments getting sent to people that shouldn't be getting it, and then they have to return it, that costs the federal government money. They couldn't do healthcare for veterans, which was 1.7 million. We need a more solvent plan. I'll work to do that.
All right, Joe. I see Tom's hand up. Is there anybody else who's wanting to weigh in?
Dr. St. George wanted a follow-up?
Okay, let's do Tom and Dr. St. George. I didn't see the order. Forgive me. I saw Tom first. I'm going to go with Tom first, and then Dr. St. George, you can come after him. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, as you go to Congress, you should be aware of the environment that you're entering. The 2004 Medicare Part D bill was lobbied $100 million worth by the drug companies to include a phrase that said, "Thou shalt not negotiate drug prices." Prior to that, 1981, there was a NIH bill which said that the NIH would develop patentable drugs and they had to give away the patent. There have also been numerous changes to patent law. This is why drug prices are high, because there's artificial monopolies created by lobbying Congress to obtain favorable treatment. We are not in a capitalistic system. We are in a corporate oligarchy.
Tom, thank you. Dr. James St. George.
Well, I'd like to point out that agreeing with a few talking points of an extremely complex subject like healthcare is not agreeing with the progressive left. Medicare for all would be a $32 trillion destruction of our economy. It's not feasible. And just from a practical standpoint, as a physician who's worked in 5 VA health systems over my career, if you want to talk about government-run healthcare, look at the veterans' care that they receive in their hospital. It's abysmal. There was we all read the news probably a few years ago about how veterans were dying before they were getting their care. And that's what Medicare would be all. It would be a cost-saving cluster where they'd rather you die than spend money to treat you. Just look at the VA system, look at the Indian reservation healthcare system. It's a complete failure.
Okay, Dr. James
Ryan,
St. George, thank you.
Ryan, then Bill.
Okay, Ryan Chamberlain, you want to weigh in? Let's go ahead.
Well, Dr. St. George just said some of the things I was going to say, so great job. But and certainly we're in a group here where we've got professionals that are disagreeing with the information that's out there. You know, the thing that I want to say is this: I'm 46 years old. I've been a part of many election cycles, just like everyone on this screen has been. And some of what we're talking about today is not the first time it's been talked about. It's just about every election cycle, there's a group of candidates that promises to fix these problems, and they get there and they don't fix them. And we're faced with a group of people in DC right now that many have been there too long. They feel entitled. They're too busy doing favors for everybody else. They can't do what they were elected to do. It's time to replace, and we're all running for I believe we want a better country. That's why we're running. But it is time for the American people to say enough is enough with this current Congress. And let's get up there and create some results.
Ryan, thank you very much. Bill Engelbrecht, you want to weigh in?
Yes, thank you, John. One of the things that I think that we really should look at is these patents that the drug industry has. Reason that the cost of prescriptions are generally high in the beginning is because they have to use that money towards research and development. However, let's say after 10 years, let's just use that as a point in time, those patents or the drug company actually drops their cost from, whatever it may be to a cost plus. So for example, if it costs the drug company to make insulin for $5, then they can turn around and sell it for $25, not the $350, not the $500, whatever it was before. I believe those patents can be opened up to the free market at that point and allow everybody, especially an essential drug like insulin, it should be opened up, and we should not be robbing the Americans here today of their insulin, as well as the cost of it all. Thank you.
Bill, thank you very much. Before I move to the next topic, I want to make sure that nobody's hands are up. How are we doing? Okay, I'm going to take the silence as good. So let's change it up a little bit, because we've talked a lot of COVID, and I know if everybody at home is like me, it's so important, but man, you can get fatigued by all the talking of it. Let's talk about something positive in Florida, and the reason so many people come to Florida, which is our waterways. Obviously the beautiful weather and all the water. In fact, I took my 10-year-old daughter fishing today at Guana Reserve. It was fabulous. So what do you propose to protect Florida's coastlines, the water, and other natural resources. In particularly, how do you feel about offshore drilling? We got a couple of questions from folks, so I kind of combined them all. But what would you do to protect our water resources, which are a huge draw for our state? And also, how do you feel about offshore drilling off of Florida's coastline? Let's start with that. And who is up?
Adam, then Phil.
Okay, Adam Christensen, you're up.
So this one should hit all of us really hard. This last year, we had a company that tried to come in and basically destroy an entire town within our district. That company found a small family-owned business that had basically the rights to take water out of the Santa Fe River for almost nothing. They tried to buy that company and then extract as much water as possible, which would have destroyed the city of High Springs, because if you don't have any springs, you don't have any tourism, you don't have an economy. What we need to do is we need to go after the corporate cartels that are coming in and destroying the free market. They are destroying the ability for family-owned businesses and basically everyone else to compete. They are undercutting the market everywhere, and they are basically making everyone's lives here more expensive, more difficult. And at the end of the day, they don't have competition. So that's one thing that we need to do right in our own backyard.
Adam, thank you very much. Phil Dodds.
Yeah, so let's just come out and be clear that we should prohibit drilling for oil off the coast of Florida. I believe our current representative voted in favor of that, and I believe that was a mistake, right? So there's a time and a place for imposing the will of the people, and I think this is one of them. We should not be drilling for oil. Thank you.
Okay, Phil, thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay,
David.
Tom, go ahead. Oh, I saw Tom, but did David go up first?
Oh, David.
Forgive me,
Take Tom, then David.
Okay, Tom Wells, we're going to go with you, and then David, you're next.
All right. Well, I've been protesting phosphate mines in Bradford and Union County for a few years now. They are a source of tremendous potential water damage. They also introduce radon into the atmosphere, endangering people who live there for the profit of a few. The property rights of the many should prevail over the property rights of the few. Basically, in a fair market capitalism, there should be compensation for any damage done by your production of a product. And the most damaging product on earth right now is fossil fuels. If you actually tax them, as 27 Nobel laureates in economics recommended a year ago, if you tax carbon simply for its detrimental effects on health, that would be about a $200 per ton CO2 equivalent tax. That would dramatically alter the market from what it is now, but it would stabilize the market, synchronize it with the principles that we should all adhere to, that we don't harm our neighbor for our own benefit. The destabilization of the markets needs to be compensated by returning all that revenue as a universal basic income to the people, so the people who have reduced footprints will come out ahead.
Tom, thank you very much. David Theus.
This is a perfect opportunity where I get to be a representative of the people in my district and put their needs before my own. You know, I grew up on a lake, Lake Conway in Orlando, where it was pristine and clear. You could see right to the bottom from the dock. And I used to go to Rock Springs and Wekiva Springs as a kid. And I think tourism and the folks that live right here at Salt Springs, I was just down at Salt Springs the other day talking to some folks, and they can't even use their springs because we've got some regulatory issues in place that are probably too much. But the bottom line is we have to protect our water sources. This water source is God's gift to us. And it brings not only money from tourism and ecotourism that supports places like Salt Springs and High Springs, but it also gives us something we get to drink and bathe in. And so I think it's important critically that we preserve. You know, I was talking to folks in Brooker just the other day, and they're concerned about that water tower, that well that taps right into the ground, that phosphate may be damaging. We need to be good stewards of our natural resources.
David, thank you very much.
Joe,
Anybody
then
else
Amy.
Okay, Joe, go ahead.
Yes, our natural resources play a key role in our local communities. Each generation does have responsibility to be good stewards of our natural resources, to ensure domestic prosperity, future use, and enjoyment to our next generation. I do respect local governance, prosperity, rights, and believe policy should serve the needs of local communities, not the other way around. Now, offshore drilling. America and Americans, it's the cars, it's our lifestyle. Now, if there are other ways, I believe that there are other things that we could find that it's not just, should just be one or the other. We need to break these parameters where it shouldn't just be the same conversations over and over again about Republicans being this one-sided and Democrats being this other-sided. We should be evolving, taking both ideas. That's why I believe in a two-party system. And we can have both. Why can't we drill offshore, but make sure and have parameters when accidents and things like that do happen, that we do have the parameters, the resources to either limit or to make sure that they don't happen at all. There is nothing, perfect about any solution, but we can't just go back to just one or the other. We need to evolve our mindset. And if we can't do it locally amongst each other and getting along and having these conversations, then we can't expect the people in DC to do it either. Thank you.
Joe, thank you. Thank you. Amy Pope-Wells, you're up.
Yes, so this is probably one of the most shocking experiences I've had going through District 3 over the last couple of months. So I received a phone call from citizens in Melrose, Florida, and they asked me to come down and they wanted to meet me. So I went down a little nervous, but look forward to hearing to them. And I cannot tell you how shocked I was. The people in Melrose, Florida and Bradford area were in such an uproar and upset about their water. I didn't even know what to say. I had to come back to my office and take some notes and actually even go and visit Chemours or Chemours, however you say it, to try to understand what was occurring over in this district. And I will tell you, there's always two sides to every conversation, but the one thing that bothered me the most was there was no regular conversation about trust and transparency. Something's happening here and I don't know what. We have to do everything to protect our environment. I think we should continue a moratorium on offshore drilling because we can't sacrifice our water. But yet, every time this conversation come up, people say, well, it's a local problem. It's not a federal problem. I can't weigh in. I can't do this. Here's the bottom line. This is a trust and transparency conversation. We need to continue doing things that protect our waterways and protect the beauty that God has given us. And I am just absolutely still shocked about how this problem is still a problem.
Amy, thank you very much.
Dr. St. George.
In the queue? Dr. St. George, you're
and
up.
then Kat.
Or just an observation. As unlike many things that we talk about, this is one issue that both sides of the aisle in Florida agree on. Both Republicans and Democrats have spoken against offshore drilling in Florida. I think there's overwhelming support from the voters in Florida not to drill offshore.
Okay, thank you. Kamek, you're up.
Thank you. And I think everyone here can agree that no one wants dirty air or water. We're all residents of the great state of Florida. But at the end of the day, we all want policy that is rooted in science. And there needs to be some synergy between federal policy and state policy. Currently, that is not the case. So there needs to be an approach when it comes to environmental policy that is common sense based, respect for personal and private property rights, but also balances the economic and environmental priorities, because both issues are dependent on each other. You cannot have one without the other. So going back to the very basic premise that we can all agree upon, that we all want clean air, we all want clean water, we all want a safe, clean environment, that is something that we need to begin that conversation with. And as far as the offshore drilling component goes, the Florida delegation traditionally hangs pretty tough together when it comes to this issue. And I hear the ding right there.
That's all right.
And I think, and I agree that this is an issue that is bipartisan in nature. Florida voters overwhelmingly support a moratorium on offshore drilling. So many folks remember the oil spill in 2010 and the devastating economic effects that it had. both in property damage and ecosystem damage, but also the perception is still lingering there, which has caused impacts for tourism and ecotourism. So thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Okay.
Todd Chase.
Todd Chase, please chime in if you would, sir.
But I will point out, hasn't been talked about yet, our state and governor right now are making great strides. They've approved a 4-year plan of $2.5 billion to go towards our waterways, the Everglades, our springs, our rivers. And as people have talked about, springs and rivers are a big part of the economy of this district, from Black Creek and Middleburg all the way to High Springs and down to other places, Salt Springs. So, the state has done a good job. I think it's the federal government can continue to support that. Our water management districts, while politicized, do try to do a good job to set policy and balance economics with the reality and then science. And I think it's important. And I think it is something, that other people pointed out. We don't all want this or that on both sides. And there is a lot of the things that we all love about Florida are similar. And we'll continue to try to support those kind of policies. But I'm proud to be in this state. And I'm proud of our legislature here.
Todd Chase, thank you very much. Let's see. Is there anybody else that I haven't hit yet on this issue?
Bill.
Okay. We are running up against it. I want to squeeze one more in. I think I can go long rather than short. I think. I don't know. Nobody told me if I can. But I'm going to do this. And then we'll do one more question, and then we will wrap this up. And I have so many questions to get to. I can't possibly choose any one that's going to be super involved. So let's get with one that might be a yes or no question. Do you support term limits for members of Congress? How about that for a final thought? Who wants to? Okay, I see Kat's hand go up. Kamek, go ahead. I saw your hand first.
Yes, and I'm proud to support the term limits pledge.
Okay, thank you very much. Who's
Bill,
next?
Bill, Dr. George, then Ryan.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
I absolutely support it. I think we should have anywhere from 8 to 12 years of a term limit. When you have a term limit, it actually fosters new thinking. So I absolutely believe the term limit should be in place.
Thank you, Bill. Dr. St. George.
I believe all of us, probably, I think everyone probably in the candidate list has signed the pledge to either vote for or co-sponsor legislation that would require term limits of all members of the House. It is impressive very impressive that Congressman Yoho pledged 8 years and kept his promise. But until all members of the House keep that promise, we have issues that prevent new thoughts and new life from coming into our House.
Dr. James St. George, thank you very much.
Ryan, then Tom.
Okay, Ryan first. Go ahead.
I absolutely support term limits. Absolutely.
Well said. Thank you, Ryan Chamberlin. Tom Wells.
Well, I'm going to be the odd man out here. And I do not support term limits. I support a conscious citizenry. And without them term limiting the people that need to be kicked out and recognizing those people who are consistently contributing, we don't really have a democracy if we just depend on rules to tell you when to start and stop. That's my opinion.
Tom Wells, thank you.
Joe, then Adam.
Joe Dallas Millado, go ahead, sir.
I do support term limits, and I did sign that pledge, but actions speak louder than words. And I do agree with my colleague, Tom. We have rules and laws already in place. There's no means to add on another one. Not to mention, you do already mention that it's been introduced for how many Congresses, and it's never gonna move because the current Congress up there doesn't even wanna do that. It's a PR scheme. Now, our campaign is to do exactly what's going on here. It shouldn't be ridiculous that there's 10 candidates in a primary. There should be 20 in every candidate, every primary, all across the country. This is what this campaign's about, and I love that there's this many in District 3, because that shows that there's that many people that love their district enough that they're gonna put it all on the line and do something that everybody else is scared to do. Thank you.
Joe Dallas Millado, thank you very much. Adam Christensen, I believe you're next.
I support term limits by way of publicly funding elections because they would negate the ability or the need for an 8-year term limit. Because at that point, we would not simply be switching out a face in Congress and still have the same money, the same corporate backers, and the same power players that we would have. And if you don't do that, term limits are useless. You don't actually fix who's actually in charge.
Adam Christensen, thank you very much.
Todd, then David.
Right. Okay, Todd Chase.
I've signed the pledge as well. I support term limits. I have for a very, very long time, long before running for Congress, and I'll support them long after my term in Congress expires.
Todd Chase, thank you very much. David Theus.
I have this conversation daily when I'm out in the field. So there's two sides of us. First of all, the founders said, come to Washington and serve, and then go home to your farms and businesses. So I applaud Mr. Yoho, and I am going to run under the same self-inflicted term limit of 8 years, if you'll give me 4 2-year terms. The problem, to speak to Mr. Tom Wells, and I applaud him for saying that, is if we had a congressman or a senator that was doing their job properly and exceeding the expectations of the people they represent, we'd want them to be there a long time. But the problem is we have no checks and balances to get people out as we would think maybe someone from the left or someone from the right that's been there forever. And so the only governing piece of that would be term limits. So to get Congress, the Senate, or the representatives to vote on this, good luck. They won't do it. Thank you.
Amy, then Philip.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Amy, then Philip.
Amy Pope Wells, you're up next.
So term limits. I believe in term limits.
Go ahead.
I heard your bell.
Yeah, that was not correct.
That's okay. I support term limits across the board on all elected positions. You know, the most important thing to talk about in this is not just do we believe in term limits, number one, but number two is also who wins to actually follow through with that commitment. I'm sure maybe Biden and Pelosi at some point believed in term limits, right? Well, you see how that went. You know, I signed the pledge for term limits, but I think one of the things that's important for this group of people to see is not only have I signed the pledge, I championed it in my local community in 2018. I cannot tell you how much heat and pressure I caught from a lot of the constitutional officers over it because they didn't want term limits. So it's tough, but you have to stand for what you believe in, and I support term limits, and I will self-term. Thank you.
Amy Pope Wells, thank you very much. Phil Dodds, you are up.
Hey, so I wanted to say that although I disagree with him on a lot of things, I really respect Representative Yoho for holding to his commitment and term limiting himself. While in office, so that must have been really hard to do. He could have ran and won easily and stayed in power. So that was a good example to everyone about keeping your word. So I'm impressed by that. I think overall, I'm of two minds on term limits. I understand everyone's argument for them, and I agree with those, but it's complicated. So that on the one hand, term limits would kick out people who have held on to power and are entrenched, and that's important. On the flip side, if you have term limits that are too narrow, where we're turning over representatives too frequently, special interests and corporations will always be there, and they'll end up by driving the elections for all these new candidates over and over again. And so then that'll shift more power to big money. So I'd be in favor of some kind of term limit plus money in politics compromise that would make sure special interests stay out while we figure out the right balance for term limits as well. Thank you.
Phil Dodds, thank you very much. Anybody else in line here before we wrap this thing up?
That's them all.
I believe we've got to everybody there. So I want to just take a quick moment to thank each and every one of the candidates for being a part of it. First, for running, because that is a challenge in and of itself, but then for also to take time out tonight to be with us for this conversation. I hope you got something out of it at home, because I know I did, sitting here listening to all of these candidates speak their minds about some important issues that we all face. And obviously we scratched the surface, could have been here for another couple of hours to get through even some of them. So again, to the candidates, I say thank you very much for being here. Very much appreciate all you're doing. Folks at home, hope you got something out of it. And remember, August 18th, go vote.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, John.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody.
Take care.